Hey, welcome to Startup Dad Headquarters, where we're exploring the intersection between fatherhood, entrepreneurship, and life. And today's Startup Dads, I'm really excited to introduce our guest onto the show. But before I tell you who it is, let me set the stage for our guest today. And I'm going to read a parable from his show, which I absolutely love. And it goes like this. An old grandfather told his grandson, "My son, there is a battle between two wolves inside of us all. One is evil, it is anger, jealous, greed, and resentment. The other is good, it is joy, love, hope, humility, kindness, empathy, and bravery." The boy thought about it for a little while and asked, "Grandfather, which wolf wins?" The old man quietly replied, "The one you feed." Wow. I absolutely love that parable. And I'm really super excited to have on the show today Eric Zimmer, the host of a smashingly new podcast in iTunes titled The One You Feed. Eric has been helping build companies for 15 years. He has been involved in technology for even longer than that and has led major software programs for Fortune 20 companies. He is the CEO for a solar energy company called Tipping Point. Eric lives in Columbus, Ohio with his wife, two kids, and three dogs. He loves music with a passion, and when you check out his show, which I know you will, you'll find that all the music you hear is produced by him and his co-host. He is always curious and learning about absolute. He's always curious and learning, and absolutely loves meeting new people, which is probably the reason why his podcast was named one of the best of 2014, and is crushing it in iTunes. So I'm super excited, like I said, to have Eric onto the show. Eric, welcome to Startup Dad Headquarters.
Thanks, Joel. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So you're saving the planet with the solar company, building companies, creating your own music, raising two children, and inspiring thousands to feed their good wolf through your podcast. Tell me, what don't you do?
Well, maybe any of those things particularly well, I'm not sure. But I I'm just I'm a curious guy. I like to do lots of different things, and that's sort of been a theme that I followed throughout my career.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely want to get into the early stages of your entrepreneur journey, your startup dad journey. But I told the audience a little bit about you. Please take a second. Let us know what you have going on right now with your business and what's really exciting you about the one you feed and any other business that you have going on.
Yeah, well, right now, you mentioned the solar company in the intro. I'm in the process of actually trying to sell the solar company right now. Um, the industry for solar in Ohio has changed and is not great right now, given a lot of different political things. So that one's sort of just sitting on the stove simmering right now.
Mhm.
I do some e-commerce consulting work, and then I also am working on the podcast that you mentioned, the one you feed, which is the thing that I'm most excited about right now. So, as you mentioned, we were recently named one of the best podcasts in 2014 by iTunes, which was absolutely surprising and very exciting. So
Yeah, and the podcast you launched it this year, correct?
I did. We're almost a year old. We will be a year old on January 6th. So we're
Yeah,
right
that's
about a year old.
Yeah, that's really exciting for within 1 year of launching to be named Best of 2014, right up there with some of the big name, uh, very popular podcasts that are out today. So that must be really exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, we were really honored to be picked.
All right. So Eric, before we dive into the early stages of your startup dad journey, we have to take care of some important business first. I like to set the stage for the first segment of our show with this quote: "No other success can compensate for failure in the home." Would you agree with that?
I think I would. Absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome. With that said, we want to kick off the first segment of this show, which I call Family First. To help us do that, I asked for you to submit a family fun photo, which you did. You submitted a beautiful photo of you and your kids playing outside. Let's bring that up. Let us know what's going on in this photo and set the stage for us.
All right. So this is actually a an older photograph. The boys are older now. They're 15 and 16. One of them's actually they're 16 and 16, and one of them's driving. So this is a long time back. But when you asked for a photo, I kind of went through, and I like this one because it sort of sums up the fam. All our photos look something like this. We've got my stepson Damien in the back, who appears to be ready to hit me with a burnt stick.
Right.
Just probably come out of the fire. There's a fire to the right, and then there's my son Jordan sitting in the front, looking completely unimpressed with all of it, just kind of hanging out, taking it in. And that seems to be a variation on most all of our family photographs. Is Jordan looking pretty low key, Damien clowning around, and me sort of sitting in the middle. So we were out camping somewhere, and think we were in Pennsylvania somewhere camping at that point. Like I said, there's a fire in a tent right to the left there that you can't see in the photo.
Yeah, that looks awesome. And Damien definitely looks like he's ready to knock you out with that stick.
Definitely does. He definitely does. He's the king. He's the king of funny pictures.
Right. Nice. So with two grown boys, I mean teenage boys heading into manhood, how are you balancing everything that you have going on between the kids and the business that the podcast?
It honestly is easier now that they're teenagers. They are a whole lot less interested in spending time with me than they used to be. So um, they're involved in sports, and I try and make it to every one of the games if I can and spend time with them. But they're now it's the challenge is more getting them to spend time with us than it is me finding enough time for them. So that's been one of the changes as they've become teenagers, which I think is a pretty common change with teenagers. They're happy to do things with their friends and not their parents.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But you've been, we're definitely gonna go back into your
hmm
startup dad journey. You've been an entrepreneur for a number of years, 20 years, is that safe to say, or more?
Well, I've been working in startup companies for about 15 years. They weren't all mine necessarily. I was in several of them. I was like the third or fourth person in the door. So it was startup culture for sure.
Mhm.
So yes, I've been doing that a long time.
So how have you, as they were growing up, how were you balancing it then?
Balance is a tricky thing. I think everybody wrestles with it.
Mhm.
Um, what I found is that trying to seek balance in short time increments is really hard. If I try and balance every day or sometimes even every week, it can be really challenging because there are things that come up that are really important in both your work and your family. So, for
Mhm.
example, if one of the kids is sick or both the kids are sick, that may take priority for a few days. So, those days are out of balance. Those weeks might be out of balance, and the family is getting more. There may be other times when there's something really big happening with work, or I'm traveling, and so I don't see as much of the kids. And so, those weeks are more work balance or more work focused. So, I try and make sure that across a span of time, that
Mhm.
balance appears to be working out, which is it's a constant challenge. I don't think there's any easy answer, and if anybody wants an easy answer, I think they're going to be disappointed. Startup dad or not, I think even working in a job for someone else these days can be every bit as demanding as a startup in a lot of cases, and that balance of family is really challenging. I made a couple things. Like I said, I try and make it to their games, and that's one that I tend to be pretty inflexible on with
Mhm.
work. If I'm traveling, there's nothing I can really do about that. But if I'm in town, I try and make sure that I get there, even if I have to leave and come back or do something. That's just one of the things that seemed to be a good way for me to keep it as a priority. Whether it was the most important thing to keep as a priority, I'm not entirely sure, but it was certainly one that I picked and made it easy for me to make sure that I was involved in what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. What does fatherhood mean to you, Eric?
Wow, that's a good question. Was that one in the notes? I think you just sprung that one on me.
I did, I did.
Um, I think, boy, what does it mean? That is such a I mean, I love being a father. The kids are incredibly important to me. Um, I think it certainly is helped me become a much more, I think, responsible person, and to learn about really putting others' needs before myself, and to boy, I'm stumped on the meaning. It means a lot. How about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not the first. It's such a the responsibility is so huge, and to try to summarize it in a few words is very difficult. But I think you summarized it well. With it means a lot. It means a
Yeah.
lot. So, all right, Eric. So let's get down to it. Besides throwing out the trash, what's one way you help around the house that's not traditionally done by the man of the house?
Oh boy, I think I do all that stuff. I do the dishes, I take out the trash, I do a lot of the laundry.
Wow.
So I think a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
How
that's
about,
that's that's awesome, man.
yeah, I'm involved in a lot of that. Dishes, laundry, cooking. We're not great at cooking. We tend to eat out way more than we should.
Hmm.
I think that's a consequence of having a really busy life. Um, we
Yeah.
just don't, everybody's really busy, so it's financially not the smartest move, and probably nutritionally not always the best move, but we do a lot of it. We just There are nights where one boy's home at 6, the other's home at 7, one's home at 9. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a different dynamic. A lot of the startup dads that I've been interviewing, I'm 24 episodes into it, and a lot of the ones I've interviewed so far have younger children. I've had some older that are already out of the house, but
Hmm.
most have been younger children. So your dynamic is definitely different. I did interview Jeff Stevens, sorry, and he has teenage girls, so he's kind of in that same
Yeah.
space as well. Yeah, definitely.
Once they hit middle school, things really start to, at least for me, things really started to change. The sports that they're involved in become 6 days a week, so you're just
Mhm.
constantly going and picking up a kid, and the dynamic changes a lot. At least for us, it did when they hit middle school.
Yeah.
Now my son, the one in the front of that picture there, is driving a car. So now he just takes goes wherever he needs to go, takes care of himself, which I both love. And then there's part of me that misses driving him because sometimes it was the only real time I got with him. So
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
we have to be more conscious of it.
Right, definitely. And it sounds like, from some of the conversations that I'm having, like in terms of starting a business, although with a family, which is why I have Startup Dad and why I'm building Startup Dad, it introduces a lot of challenges, but it looks like there might be a sweet spot, if you will, if you want to call it that, where it's not as busy yet. So for me, I have a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and we haven't really gotten into the sports aspect of things. Yeah, there's diapers to be changed and bringing them home for naps and stuff like that. But during those nap times, I'm doing some work, right? And then they go to bed early. They wake up, around 8 o'clock in the morning. So I
Yep.
have time early in the morning, in the middle of the afternoon, and at night. But when you get to that teenage, middle school age, it sounds like there's a lot of activities they're involved in, and it takes up a lot more time.
It does, but then they're at practice. You take him to practice. They're at practice for a couple hours. I think it's different. I think there are open times that people can find to focus on the things that they want to focus on, whether that be a startup or different things. I think we can all find those times within our family life, but those gaps appear a little bit differently when they are younger versus older. Like you said, when they're younger, boy, it's a lot of attention. They need attention and focus all the time, as far as somebody really just keeping an eye on them. When they get older, they get a lot more self-sufficient.
Mm,
And I have to watch for, because it's really easy for them to go do their thing because they're perfectly content doing their thing, and make sure that, and I'm very content doing my thing, making sure that we find time to come together.
yeah, nice. I like that. Yeah, that's a really good point. So, Eric, our next segment is called the True Startup Dad Story. And with this being Startup Dad headquarters, we want to focus on the start. One of my favorite quotes is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take us back to the beginning and share with us the initial steps of your Startup Dad journey.
Well, I guess it depends how far you want to take that back. I think I'll start with with starting the solar energy company, because that was probably I was in startups all the time up to them, but again, they, like I said, they weren't exactly all mine. So I'll start with the solar company, and like most things in my life I've done, I have started them while I'm doing something else.
Okay.
So the solar energy company was one where I just somewhat rashly got the idea that I wanted to get into clean energy. I got a book on it at the library for some reason and got interested. I thought, oh, this would be a great idea. So I started a company, which leads me to life lesson one, which is probably don't start a company you know nothing about.
Mhm.
Um, so that, but that, I think that takes me back to the beginning of that journey. Was I was working for another startup that was in the process of being acquired, and so I started working on the side on starting to put together this solar energy company.
Mhm. Okay. So you just picked up a book in the library, and that was that was enough for you to say, "Hey, I wanna." You must have saw something.
Well, no, no. I mean, the book got me started thinking about it, and
Right.
then I started looking into it and researching it and reading, and found that yeah, there really is an opportunity here, and it was something I was really interested in, and that tends to be the thing that drives me, for better or worse, more than anything else, is what am I interested in doing?
Mhm. Okay. And now, how long ago was this, and how old were the boys? Were the boys in the picture yet? Probably close to.
Yeah, they were. It was in this would have been in 2008, so the boys would have been around 10.
Okay. Okay.
And it was an interesting time. My wife was working we live in Columbus, Ohio. She was doing a postdoctorate fellowship at Harvard. So she was up in Harvard 5, 6 days a week, came home on the weekends. It was a really crazy time. But
Wow.
yeah, that was when I started the company, and we had a few really good years, and then the solar energy landscape in Ohio really changed from a political perspective. A lot of the laws that had been passed got rolled back, and we've had a bunch of challenges with that, which is why I'm looking to sort of exit that business at this point.
Yeah, Harvard. She was in my neck of the woods. I'm 45 minutes from there.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, 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 definitely. So 2008. So let's step back even further. Now, you said you were in startup companies for a number of years, 15 years, or back to 15 years. Have you ever worked for a corporation? Have you ever worked like a standard 9 to 5?
I worked I didn't get a real job until I was probably 25 years old.
Hmm.
I didn't go to college either. So when I finally stumbled into something that looked like the corporate world at 25, I got a job as a customer service representative in a sort of big company at the time. They were called CompuServe. They were one of the very early internet pioneers. So that was where I started, and I worked there for about a year, and after that, I have not worked for a corporation since, but I have done consulting work where I might as well work there for a period of time with some corporations, with a couple of really large corporations, which I liked more than I expected I would. I think people in the startup community tend to be sort of condescending towards corporate work, but there was a lot about it that while I was there, I liked.
Nice. So where did the mentality, I guess, if you will, or yeah, where did the mentality, if you will, to work in a non-traditional company come from? Is it something you just fell into, or you've always been more, or you are you more comfortable in that environment than a structured corporation?
I think I'm always more comfortable in that environment. Um, when I was 16 years old, I founded a tutoring program for inner city kids. I lived in the suburbs of Columbus, and so I founded a program where we took kids from various high schools in the suburbs and took them down, and we did some tutoring for some of the kids in more disadvantaged areas. So, and we built a scholarship program. So I had gotten sort of the um, thrill of starting something up from nothing and realized I really liked it. And I'm not great with following rules, I guess, that
Under-
the customer service job was misery to me because I had to be on the phone at a certain time. Every minute was tracked. When I got off the phone, it was all, and that just did not work well for me. I worked really hard and I did really well at it, but
Mhm.
only to get out, to get promoted out, which I did as quickly as I could. But so yeah, I kind of stumbled in. One of your questions is about a moment where you had some fear. Um, which I'll maybe talk to some of that right now. It was early in my career. This is how I got into startups, but I was working with this company, CompuServe. Like I said, I was pretty new in my career. I had just gotten promoted out of customer service. I was starting to see, oh, maybe something with computers would be, computers or software would be a good career.
Mhm.
And CompuServe got bought by AOL, and I was laid off. And at the
Mhm.
time, my first wife, Jordan's mother,
Mhm.
um, was 3 months pregnant with him. And so I was scared to death because I'd never had a real job before. I never had been to college. I got this one job. It seemed like the only reason I moved up was because I worked hard. And I ended up taking that severance money and spending a lot of it on training so that I could go further into this thing. And I think that was a moment where I sort of took a gamble. We had a certain amount of money to get us through, no real idea of what was next. And I chose to say, well, I'm going to spend this time and this money to go after this goal. And at the time, that was something called Microsoft Certified System Engineer. It seemed like a big deal at the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I got that certification, and then I found a guy found me who ran like a 4-person consulting company. It was very small. They did network engineering, firewalls, and I thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened. I
Mhm.
was like, this is so cool. It's just 4 people. It's this very loose culture. And then about 2 weeks after I joined that company combined with another company and started a startup company called submitorder.com. And this was right in the heart of the internet, the first internet boom.
Mhm.
And the company just took off and went crazy. And it was a bizarre period because I went from, a year and a half before, I had never done any work outside of a restaurant.
Mhm.
And I was now sitting in Silicon Valley in boardrooms out there as we tried to raise venture capital money. And it was just a totally insane experience. But that really got me hooked on startup culture.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story. And so you basically have seen multiple, I mean, being the fourth employee, I mean, you're seeing the company starting from the pretty much from the ground up and then getting bought up and then expanding and then getting venture capitalists. So you have a lot of experience with starting companies, and I think we mentioned that in the bio, 15 different companies. So now bring us up to starting the podcast. How did that process go? Now you have teenage boys. How did that process go exactly?
I think the podcast was I think I saw the writing on the wall for the solar energy company quite some time ago. So it
Mm-hmm.
was just a matter of, all right, what's the right way to transition out of this? I ultimately just decided that I wasn't loving doing it anymore. And so uh, it was enough work, it was enough struggle. We had had a couple good years weren't as good. It was enough of a pain at that point that I thought, why should I keep doing this?
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking about what was next, and I never really landed on anything. And God knows, I don't think the podcast was what's next as far as like a giant career move, but um, it was something I wanted to do. I got really interested in internet marketing. Um, just this idea that every business I've ever been in has been a business that existed in the real world, had employees, it made something. Even if that something that it made was software, it still did that. And, we went out to businesses to do sales calls. It was all business to business type work. And this idea that you could just start something that just existed only on the internet was sort of interesting to me. So that's why I decided to start the podcast. I think I also decided to start it because that parable of feeding your good wolf um, is relevant. I think in everybody's life, but certainly in my life, it has been very relevant. And I think it's important to remain aware that of the choices that we're making in life, it's very easy for me to go on autopilot, get
Mhm.
really busy with work, get really busy with different things. And so the podcast to me, I thought, well, if I'm interviewing people every week about stuff like this, then I'm going to be thinking about it all the time. I'm going to
Mhm.
be reading their books, I'm going to be interviewing them. And then also, my best friend does a lot of audio stuff. And so I was like, oh, he could work on the audio side of the podcast.
Mhm.
And so I started it really as I wanted to do it for the reason I said sort of keep my head in the game with that stuff. And then also to spend more time together with him, honestly, because being older and being busy, we didn't do it very much. And it was something I felt like I was missing from my life. And so that was, again, another sort of spur of the moment. I came up with the idea. And the next day I asked him if he wanted to do it. And I think within a couple of weeks, we were probably interviewing people. So it was, I'm not prone to a lot of contemplation, probably.
Right, right. So how did the whole website and stuff like that, was that pretty simple for you to kind of create the website, create the branding, logo, and all that kind of stuff?
I don't know if the word I would use is simple. I mean, I've been in software for many, many years, but that doesn't mean that I develop software. So
Mm.
I hadn't built a web page in 15 years. But I generally can find my way around those things. We got lucky with the logo. I tried 99 designs, and I got about 8 or 10, and they were okay. And then another really good friend of mine is an artist, just sort of threw the one out to us that we've got, which I absolutely love and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really like. So I just hit the lottery on that one. Um, and yeah, I did all the website stuff. I wouldn't say it was really hard, but it is time consuming. It just takes a while, and I don't think our website is great, but it just takes a while to work through all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
As I'm
definitely.
sure you know, I mean,
Mhm.
everything you've got looks very, very professional, very high end. So I don't know if you're doing that all yourself, but it's a lot of effort to get to that place.
I am doing it on myself as of right now, but yeah, it's very a lot of time consuming. It lots of late nights, early morning to get it done.
Yep, yep.
Definitely. So how do going from startup companies, you had you have two boys that you have to worry about, take care of. How do you manage, or how do you how's the discussion with your wife in terms of, hey, I'm shutting down this solo company and now I'm starting this podcast? How do you have those discussions?
Well, I think I, I've never been a leaper. So I think a lot of people talk about that. All right, I make the leap all the way from this thing. And I have tended to always keep my fingers in a couple different things so
Mm.
that there is revenue coming in the door. And so I think I've managed to keep a fairly wide I've got a pretty wide area to vary within before anybody starts getting upset because I have ways to continue to produce money. I think if I said, "Oh, I'm quitting everything I'm doing and tomorrow I'm going to start a podcast," that would be an entirely different conversation
Mm.
than, "Hey, look, I know what it takes to run this house to take care of the kids. I find ways. I mean, she works too. She's a cancer researcher, so we kind of work that out. So I don't think there's been a ton of discussions because, as I said, I haven't been a leaper in that way. Like I said, I've tended to, consulting work has been good to me, so I've tended to be able to do that sort of thing. Like you, I've worked, do a lot of nights or weekends, and I was always in, my day job, so to speak, has always been either in another startup or doing consulting work, and then the solar energy company was a little bit different because that took a ton of effort. But the podcast, I am pretty able to do some consulting work and also work on the podcast.
Yeah. And what do you see as the vision of the podcast?
You know, I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. Like I said, I started it with pretty modest goals. Like I wanted to talk to people about things that I thought were important, and I wanted to spend more time with my friend, and um, that really happened. That I mean, I met those two goals, and I hoped that maybe people would be interested in it, which has also happened. But I didn't go into it with a monetization play or an idea that this was going to be my business or my career.
Mm.
Now, I think about that sort of stuff, but I still don't know that I have a plan. I'm working on a book right now with, maybe a lot of themes sort of show up. I'm sure you interview a bunch of people, you tend to hear certain things over and over that you go, oh, well, these are key themes in this area. And so I've got some key themes that keep showing up, and I'm sort of working on a book on those, but I don't know the direction exactly, except I want to keep producing shows that people seem to really like. I get a lot of letters from people about how much it helps them in their life, and so
Mm,
I'm keeping my ambitions modest on that one right now.
yeah, absolutely. So, Eric, it's time for Real Dad's Real Talk. This is where we go deep and I ask a series of tough questions that we just can't skip over.
All right,
Eric, Eric, you ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
All right. So you talked about failure earlier. So now we're going to talk about doubts and fears. Uh, specifically from the perspective of a father or a provider. What has been one of the doubts or fears that you've struggled with, and how have you how have you gotten over it?
I think one of the doubts or fears that comes up periodically, as I mentioned, I'm not a leaper, so I've got my fingers in a variety of things, and I think the doubt that comes with that is, am I giving enough of myself to any of those things? And
Mhm.
so am I really moving forward enough in each of those areas to feel like I'm not going to get left behind? and
Mhm.
and so I keep an eye on that, and that doubt does come up. So far I feel like it's managed to work out. The consulting work that I do, people remain very, very happy with the work I do. The podcast is going very well. The solar company went pretty well for a while. But that is the doubt. How much time should I be spending on each thing? I think causes doubt, and can cause anxiety sometimes.
Yeah. Now you mentioned this is a add-on question. You mentioned the consulting work quite a few times. That's consulting with software, correct?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Right.
The last several years, I've been doing consulting work with really large companies on some e-commerce work,
Got it. Nice.
which has been, it's been, like I said, I sort of had I would never work for a corporation perspective. And I mean, I've been offered jobs there many times, and I don't really want them, and I haven't taken them. But I do have to say, sometimes the projects within those corporations are really cool. I've done some really interesting and fun things within the corporation, and really learned a lot about what it takes to build something to a really big level,
Mm,
that you just never see in most startups.
right.
The vast majority of startups, you don't get to a point where you have to figure out how to um, deal with the level of volume that you might see in a retailer for Black Friday, for example, or things like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff to be learned there also. So I've got a very different view of corporate culture than I used to, but I still don't think it's the right place for me.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's just not the place that I think long term I would be happy. I tend to, as is probably obvious, be happy doing a variety of different things. So
Right. Yeah, there's a term called, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, it's called multi-potentialite.
I've never heard of it. Nope.
You never heard of it? It
Mm-mm.
basically, I forget the young lady who coined it, but Emily Watts, I think it's her name. But anyways, basically someone who, jack of all trades, master of nothing. It's really saying, no, you're jack of all trade. You mastered being a jack of all trade. You know,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do think that's a very good description of me. At the startup companies that I've worked for, a couple of them I've pretty much worked myself out of a job,
mm,
because as you start to build a company, when it's really, really small, there's a ton of stuff that has to be done by a very small group of people. You got to do sales, you got to build software, you got to do marketing, you've got to build a customer support team, you've got to manage projects. And I can do all of those things, and I could do a bunch of them simultaneously. But
mm,
once you get to a certain size, now you need to build a really great customer service department. Well, there are thousands of people on this planet that can do that better than I can.
mm,
The same thing with marketing. You want to there are So I think my usefulness has tended to become outmoded when the company settles in a little bit. I seem to work best, and the corporate things I've been brought into, I seem to do best in a pretty chaotic environment where where a lot of things have to be figured out and you have to kind of make something out of nothing. That seems to be where I thrive, and I like that. I've mastered being a jack of all trades.
That's right. Now, what's the hardest personal sacrifice you've had to make?
Music.
Mm,
Um, I used to play in bands. I used to write a lot of songs. I love music. There simply hasn't been room for it with family and pursuing different startup careers or businesses or different things. I still play, and as you mentioned at the beginning, all the music in the podcast is my partner and I, which is really satisfying. But that has definitely taken a serious back burner for me, and so that's been a pretty big sacrifice. But there just wasn't a way to there's just no more time at a certain point. You just simply have to go, okay, these are all important, but if everything's important, nothing's important. So
yeah,
how do I prioritize these things?
yeah. One of the biggest limiters keeping dads from taking action and starting their own business is private health insurance. What do you do to ensure that your family is adequately covered?
I get to claim the cop out on this one because my wife works for a large university or has always worked for some large, she does cancer research. So there's always been insurance that way. So I've never had to think about it. So I'm not of much help there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the situation that I'm going to be dealing with my wife, where she's a NICU nurse, and I'm going to jump on her insurance. So, but I still have to find that answer for the startup dads listening. So, we'll definitely get the answers, and we've gotten some pretty good answers from some of the dads in previous episodes. So, tell us about the intersection between fatherhood and entrepreneurship. I know I asked you about fatherhood earlier. We've been talking about entrepreneurship. Do you see an intersection between those two?
Um, I I think the thing about entrepreneurship that I have at least hoped has come through to the kids and where I see an intersection is that they can go and do what they want to do.
Mhm.
I think that's thing one that hopefully on me being an entrepreneur has showed them that you don't have to go do something you don't like doing, that work can be something that's enjoyable and fun, and it's not a bad word.
Mhm.
To teenagers it is, but we hope that passes. Um, so I think that's one. I think the only other thing that's the main one that comes to mind. The other thing I would say is a lot of times in entrepreneurial situations, I've had a lot more flexibility to do things like bring the kids to work, bring the dogs to work. Um, a lot more flexibility about I'm going to leave for 3 hours today and go do this thing because I'm going to work on it later. So I think in some ways entrepreneurship can make family life better in that way by giving you more flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question before we jump out of this segment is, knowing what you know now and with your wealth of experience, what would you have done differently from the start?
I would have not, I mean, I would not have allowed I would not have allowed our standard of living probably to go up as much as I did in certain cases when the money was good, because that golden handcuff idea is a real one. Um, and I think it's a lot easier to not have something than to start to scale something back and do that. So if there was something I could do over again, I probably would have started thinking about that sooner and been more mindful of that I might not that even though I can pay that bill easily now, I may not always want to do it. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the one thing I probably would have done differently.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great answer, and I haven't thought about that. That's definitely one for the startup dads out there to consider, and definitely keep in the pocket there while they're building their business and starting to generate income. So
Yeah, I mean it's both with your wife and with your kids, right?
yeah,
I mean you just I don't want the entrepreneurial things that I do to always equal sacrifice for them. Sometimes it does, but I don't want it to always be that way. And I think I could have thought through that better in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, so we're entering the final segment of the show. I like to call this the rapid fire handyman segment. And as the name kind of dictates, is we want to pick up the pace with this one because we want to be cognizant of your time and we want to let you go. This is where we quickly reach into your toolbox and you provide the Startup Dad community with some really useful tools. Are you ready?
Sure.
What's your number one time management hack or tool?
Use very small bits of time well. It's very easy to think, oh, I've got 12 minutes, so I'll just hop on Facebook. But it's amazing what you can get done in 12 minutes or 5 minutes or 7 minutes.
Ooh,
Um, that's the biggest one for me is that I've learned to try and use those small bits of time well instead of just thinking there's not enough to really get anything done. When I do that, and I don't always do it, but when I do it, I am vastly more productive.
nice. What's one personal habit you believe attributes to your success as a father, husband, and entrepreneur?
Learning, just
Mm.
always being interested, reading, learning, trying to be a better person. I think and when I say learning, it's not always just about software or just about business. I try and make sure that I'm learning things across a variety of fields, and some of those involve, psychology or self-help or whatever word you want to use. But I think that being a better person, focusing on character, helps a lot in every aspect of your life.
Mm, nice. What's one way you manage your health?
Exercise and meditation.
Okay. And what's one book every startup dad should absolutely read?
Um, I think there's the all-time classic is The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mhm.
It's an old book. It's not real hip, it's not real new. There's no hacks in it. Matter of fact, the book is almost a long diatribe against hacking. It's this idea that life it takes this amount of effort, but the principles that are laid out there are so critical. And actually, I will modify that just a slight bit and say the Seven Habits also of Highly Effective Families, written by the same guy, Stephen R. Covey, which is really about it's brilliant work about how you and your family work together through things. So I recommend that really highly. We're doing a course on it right now, that people get for signing up for the email list on the 7 habits of highly effective people right now. But um, the book itself is really, really good, and so is the 7 habits of highly effective families.
Nice. Yeah, I did see the sign up for the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I didn't see the one for the family. I didn't even know that.
There's not one for the families that I'm
Right.
doing. It's just for 7 habits of highly effective people. Maybe we'll let you take the family one.
Nice, thanks. And I didn't even know that book exists, so I definitely have to run out and get that. Maybe when I run out tonight to do last minute Christmas shopping, I'll run into a Barnes and Nobles and grab that. So cool. Thank you for that one.
Yep.
And I didn't ask you with the meditation, when are you squeezing that in? Are you doing that in the morning, afternoon, night? How you get that in?
I do that one whenever I can figure it out. I know that the general rule out there is that you want to try and do that sort of thing at the same time every day. That never works for me. So I just commit to doing it at some point. And some days it's 30 minutes, some days it's 5 minutes, but I commit to doing it at some point,
Mm,
somewhere, somehow. And so that may not be the best way to go about it, but I found with me that I need to be flexible in building habits. um, we had James Clear on a couple of
yes.
weeks ago, and his quote was, stick to the schedule, reduce the scope. So basically, do every day what you said you were going to do, but if you only do it for a couple of minutes, you only do it for a couple of minutes, and that is incredibly wise wisdom that I try and practice all the time.
Nice. And that still supports building that habit regardless of how many, whether regardless if you're doing it for 5 minutes or 30 minutes.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So Eric, this was an amazing interview, and your journey is long and inspiring. And
It's
I,
because
and
I'm old.
no, no, you don't look at all, man. So my final question is a little bit long, but it always produces really powerful answers. And here it is. On the other side of the broadcast is a startup dad who at this point is fired up and is ready to rock. But as soon as the broadcast is over, he's going to close his mobile device, maybe put his phone down, whatever the case may be. And by next week, he'll find himself back to the day-to-day minutia of things. What would you say to that dad to inspire him beyond this broadcast?
I use a quote by Arthur Ashe, which is one of my favorites, which says, "Start where you are, use what you can, do use what you have." I'm sorry, let's try this again. How about we say, "Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can." And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is, I think that anybody can start an entrepreneurial journey wherever they are. They
Mm-hmm.
just have to start. And they have to start with what they've got. And if I and a lot of other entrepreneurs I know waited until the situation seemed right or the circumstances lined up or I had enough time, nothing would ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
So figure out what it is, even, and it's I don't think we have to figure out way down the road, but pick a couple steps in the direction of what you want and do those two steps. Do those with the little bit of time you have, and then see what things look like, and pick two or three more steps after that, because the the road looks really long and overwhelming from where we sit, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but the road changes. The road will look different when you're three steps down the road. To your point about, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You see different things when you're on the fifth step than you did on the first step. So start where you are and do something concrete. Reading another book on entrepreneurship is not the same as starting a company. It is not, you know, start a business plan, use the business canvas, model, do something, but take an actionable, tangible step towards building what you want. And again, make those as small as they have to be, but just keep doing them.
Absolutely. What a powerful answer. Thank you, Eric, for your time and sharing your startup dad journey and for a truly inspiring episode. Please take a moment and share with the startup dad community any additional words and let us know where we could find you.
I think my additional words were just kind of what I said.
Yeah.
Go for it, do something. Um, we're capable of more than we think. And you can find me at oneyoufeed.net. That's ONEYOUFEED.net.
Nice. Thanks, Eric. Have a good night.
Yep. Thank you, Joel.